You spotted them this morning, dark purple-brown flecks creeping up the lower leaves of your black-eyed Susans, and your stomach dropped. But look closer at where they started. Those spots rode up from the soil, splashed onto the plant by rain, one droplet at a time. The plant will almost certainly survive. And 5 moves done now stop the climb cold. Subscribe and let's stop those spots before they climb any higher. First, before you touch anything else, cut away every leaf carrying a spot and treat the cutting like surgery. Those flecks aren't stains. Each one is a working colony. The most common culprit, a fungus called Septoria Rudbeckiae, builds tiny black fruiting bodies right in the center of every mature lesion, pycnidia, packed with spores waiting for the next rain to launch them. Leave a spotted leaf on the plant and you've left a loaded spore cannon aimed at everything above it. Every warm, wet morning, it fires another volley. So take the entire leaf. If it's spotted or gone black, cut it back to the crown, low and clean. When the trouble is bacterial, angular spots ringed with yellow halos, or a soft stem canker, go further and prune 10 to 12 inches below the lowest mark you can see, because bacteria run inside the stem well ahead of the damage your eye can catch. Now, the step most people skip, and it's the one that decides whether any of this works. Sanitize your blades between every single cut. A quick dip in 10% household bleach or a wipe of 70% rubbing alcohol, and you're clean for the next snip. Miss it, and your pruners silently become the thing carrying the disease from leaf to leaf and plant to plant. You'd be spreading the infection with your own 2 hands and never know it. One more thing that catches folks off guard. Black-eyed Susan, Rudbeckia, can raise an itchy, angry rash on sensitive skin. An allergic contact dermatitis that shows up hours after you've been handling the foliage bare-armed on a warm afternoon. Cover up, heavy gloves, long sleeves, long pants. If your skin does meet the sap, wash it with soap and water straight away, and run those clothes through the laundry before you wear them again. When you're finished, bag every scrap. Send it out with the household trash, or burn it where that's allowed. Do not, and I mean this, toss it on the compost pile. A backyard heap never climbs hot enough to kill those overwintering pycnidia and bacterial cells. All you'd be doing is composting the disease and folding it right back into the bed come spring, then wondering why the spots returned worse than the year before. For infected tissue, the trash can is the only safe destination. Treat that rule as absolute, and you've won half the battle before it starts. The second action to take is to change the way water reaches the plant, because water is the only reason this disease can move at all. Here's what's happening down at soil level. A fungal spore or a bacterial cell can't walk. It has no way to climb from a low leaf to a high one on its own. It needs a lift, and the lift is a water droplet. When rain hits bare soil around the base of the plant, it splashes, and every splash throws a fine spray of soil and spores up onto the lowest leaves. Those leaves get infected, they manufacture more spores, and the next rain carries the lot 1 tier higher. That's the ladder the disease climbs. Watch it happen once and you'll never water from overhead again. The first move is to stop wetting the leaves. Put the sprinkler and the overhead wand away for good. Run a soaker hose or a drip line along the ground instead, and let the roots drink deep while the foliage stays bone dry from crown to tip. A dry leaf is a leaf the fungus simply cannot colonize, and that one change does more than any bottle of spray. After a hard rain, take the hose out on a soft setting and gently rinse the mud off the lower leaves. That film of soil does 2 harmful things at once. It carries live pathogen and it sits on the blade, blocking the very light the plant needs to feed itself. One clean rinse clears both, and the leaf goes straight back to feeding the plant. Then lay down mulch and lay it down right. 2 to 3 inches of shredded hardwood or pine bark over the soil does something quietly clever. It absorbs the force of each raindrop so nothing splashes back up onto the plant. You've just snapped the bottom rung off the ladder. Only, keep a 3 to 4 inch collar of open space around the crown itself. Mulch shoved against the stem traps moisture and invites crown rot, which trades one problem for a worse one. And be choosy about the material. Fresh manure or a heap of grass clippings might feel thrifty, but they rot unevenly. They can pull nitrogen out of the soil as they break down, and they build a cool, damp hotel for slugs. Bark, and only bark, does the job you actually want here. Steady, slow, and clean. Third, open the plant up and let air move through it. Think about why the lower leaves always fall first. Down in the base of a thick clump, the air sits dead still. The leaves stay damp long after the crown has dried in the sun, and damp is precisely the condition every one of these fungi is waiting for. A leaf that dries in 20 minutes shrugs off spores that would sink roots into a leaf, staying wet for hours. So your task is simple to say, and getting it right changes everything. Move the air through that clump. Begin by thinning. If a clump has grown into a dense thicket, pull some of it out and yank the volunteer seedlings crowding in around the base. Every stem you take away is one more channel for a breeze to slip through and carry the moisture off. When you set new plants, give them honest room. The perennial types, the ones like Rudbeckia fulgida that return from the same crown each year, want 18 to 24 inches between them. The native black-eyed Susan, Rudbeckia hirta, the short-lived one that reseeds itself around the garden, is content at 12 to 18. That gap isn't wasted ground. It's the airflow that keeps a whole planting dry and clean. There's also a chore that comes due every 3 years, and skipping it is exactly why so many old clumps turn into disease factories. Dig the clump, split it, and replant the strong outer pieces. Early spring or fall, either window works. The center of an overgrown black-eyed Susan goes woody and dead and stagnant, a still pocket of trapped moisture sitting right where you least want one. Splitting the plant cuts that dead heart out and hands new life to what remains, and those fresh divisions bloom stronger the next season. One habit ties all of this together, and it's an easy one to break without thinking. Never work the plant while the leaves are wet, not after rain, not in the morning dew. Wet foliage bruises the moment you handle it, and every bruise is an open door for bacteria. Meanwhile, your damp hands and sleeves ferry spores from a sick plant to a healthy one as you move down the row. Wait for a dry afternoon. The plant will forgive almost anything except being handled soaking wet. The fourth move belongs to the sprayer. If you're going to spray, spray to protect, and spray before you ever see trouble. This is the piece nearly everyone gets backwards, so hear it plainly. A fungicide is a shield, not a cure. It lays a protective film over healthy tissue and stops fresh spores from taking hold, but it cannot mend a leaf that's already spotted. Nothing turns a black lesion green again, which makes timing the entire game. You spray in spring and early summer before the lesions arrive, and above all, heading into a wet stretch when the fungus is poised to make its move. Spraying in August after the plant is already freckled top to bottom is bolting a door on an empty barn. If you'd rather stay gentle and organic, you have real options. A simple baking soda solution, or better, potassium bicarbonate, lifts the pH right on the leaf surface, and spores that would germinate happily on a neutral leaf can't get a start in that thin alkaline skin. Copper-based sprays serve as an honest broad protectant, and a biological built on the bacterium Bacillus subtilis moves onto the leaf and crowds the fungus off it. Any of these, begun early and renewed after rain, can hold the line through the season, especially if you start the week the weather first turns muggy. For heavier pressure, there are the conventional protectants, chlorothalonil, mancozeb, thiophanate methyl, which sit on the surface as a physical barrier. Azoxystrobin works by a different route worth understanding. The plant draws it up and moves it upward into new growth, so leaves that hadn't even unfurled on spray day emerge already defended, which is exactly why it earns its keep against a fast-moving outbreak. Keep an eye out for aphids while you're working, because they drag their own troubles in behind them. Rinse them off, treat the leaf undersides with insecticidal soap or neem oil, and protect the lacewings and tiny parasitic wasps already hunting them for free. What you want to steer well clear of is a broad-spectrum insecticide that kills across the board. Those wipe out the predatory mites that hold spider mites in check, and a week later you've swapped a handful of aphids for a full spider mite outbreak on a plant already fighting for its footing. Spray narrow, spray with purpose, or don't spray at all. The last thing, and the one that finally fixes the bed for good, is a bigger shift than all the rest. For a bed that spots every single year, stop fighting the plant and change the plant. At some point, the honest move is to admit a variety is losing the war where you live. If you're growing Rudbeckia fulgida goldsturm in a humid climate, you already know the arc by heart. Glorious in June, and by late summer the bottom half stands bare and freckled and worn out, year after year, no matter how faithfully you tend it. There's no shame in retiring it. Breeders have handed us better armor since. Reach instead for Rudbeckia American Gold Rush, bred on purpose to stand up to the leaf spot fungi that flatten goldsturm. The giant coneflower, Rudbeckia maxima, carries real resistance alongside dramatic blue-green paddles of foliage and stems that tower over a border. And the plain, humble native, good old Rudbeckia hirta, holds strong natural resistance and reseeds itself so freely that it renews its own stand each season. A self-sustaining patch you barely have to lift a finger for. Trade susceptible for resistant, and half of everything in this video simply stops being your problem, season after season. If pulling out established plants isn't in the cards this year, there's an old designer's trick that costs nothing but a little cleverness. It's called facer planting. Set a row of shorter, denser companions right in front of the black-eyed Susans, heuchera, yarrow, a low Shasta daisy, tall enough to screen the bare, spotted lower stems, yet short enough to leave the clean, bright flowers waving above them. The disease is still standing back there. You simply can't see it anymore, and neither can anyone strolling past your border on a summer evening. And that last point deserves saying out loud because it should lift a real weight off your shoulders. For all the alarm those spots stir up, leaf spot on black-eyed Susan is very largely cosmetic. It bruises the plant's looks and little more. It almost never kills the plant, and it rarely touches the flowers at all. The gold keeps coming whether the lower leaves are flawless or freckled. You're managing appearances and slowing a nuisance, not saving a life, and that difference matters more than it sounds. Once you truly believe that, you get to choose your battles calmly instead of flinching at the first black fleck of the summer. Notice what every one of these 5 moves actually did. Not one of them attacked a spot. They changed the water, the air, and the plant, the conditions the disease leans on. That's the shift. You quit chasing symptoms and start shutting the door they come through. Do that, and the spots lose their grip long before they ever reach the flowers. If steady, plain-spoken garden fixes are what brought you here, subscribe and keep growing with us.